I used my daughter's medical trust fund to pay off my son's gambling debt before she turned 18, figuring she'd never know when she told her grandparents. My wife and I grounded her, and now everyone says I'm a monster. When my daughter was 6, she almost died. It wasn't an accident or something simple. It was a rare autoimmune complication that came out of nowhere and spiraled fast. ICU, specialists, months of not knowing if she would bounce back or if this would follow her forever. My wife and I were barely functioning during that period. Her parents stepped in heavily, emotionally, and financially. There was a lawsuit related to delayed diagnosis and malpractice, and most of the settlement money was put into a medical trust fund for my daughter. I won't pretend I funded most of it. I didn't. Her grandparents did, and they made sure everyone knew it. The trust was always treated like this sacred thing that no one was allowed to even question. Over the years, my daughter recovered. She's 17 now, healthy, athletic, plays sports, hasn't needed anything more than routine checkups in years. The trust just sat there, a large amount of money doing nothing. I've privately thought of it as outside money for a long time, because it never felt like part of our household finances or decisions. It came with strings, opinions, and constant reminders of who really controlled it. My son is 22. He's had a rough go of things. Dropped out of college twice, changed majors, couldn't settle. He's lived at home for about 4 years now, always with a plan to move out soon. He's not stupid, but he's impulsive. He can't manage money. I've been the one handling his finances because if I don't, things spiral fast. I see that as being a parent, not enabling. A few months ago, I found out he was in serious debt from gambling. Sports betting mostly, some private online poker rooms, not just apps you can uninstall and walk away from. He borrowed from co-workers, friends, and one local guy that I don't want to get into details about. It wasn't just embarrassing debt. It was urgent, time-sensitive, the kind of thing that can turn ugly if ignored. I stepped in because someone had to. We didn't have that kind of cash sitting around. I looked at every option, loans, credit, selling things. The only place where the money existed without destroying everything else was the trust. I had conditional authority tied to medical emergencies. I know people are going to jump on that wording, but it wasn't locked away in a way that made it impossible to access. I didn't take it all at once. I moved it in smaller amounts so it wouldn't flag immediately. The intention was always to pay it back. Once my son stabilized, once things settled, the money would go back. This wasn't a vacation fund or something frivolous. It was solving a real problem. My daughter didn't find out because of a bank statement or some audit. She found out because I slipped. We were arguing about her brother living at home, and I said something along the lines of having saved his life. That's when she put pieces together. She didn't come to me calmly. She didn't ask questions. She went straight to her grandparents. That, to me, was the real betrayal. Not the money part. The going outside the family and blowing things up part. Her grandparents don't discuss. They interrogate. They treat everything like a courtroom. Suddenly I'm getting calls, emails, demands. They frame it as concern for her, but it's always been about control, about reminding me that this was their money, their decision, their leverage. My wife and I grounded our daughter because her behavior crossed a line. We took her phone, restricted the car, pulled her from extracurriculars for the time being. We also made her stop volunteering at a program she liked because it had become another place for her to air family business. This wasn't punishment for telling the truth. It was consequences for deliberately escalating instead of addressing things at home. Now everyone is calling us monsters. Extended family is weighing in. People who don't know the full picture are acting like I stole from a child. I didn't drain her future. She's healthy. She has options. That money would have sat untouched for years, possibly forever. Meanwhile, my son was on the brink of something that could have followed him for life in a very real way. Families don't run by committee. Parents make hard calls. Someone was always going to be unhappy here. I chose the option that dealt with an immediate crisis instead of a hypothetical one. If I hadn't stepped in and something worse had happened, I would have been blamed for that too. I'm trying to understand when prioritizing one child in a moment of real danger turned into me being labeled irredeemable. I'm open to judgment, but I'm not accepting the idea that this was done out of malice or greed. It was a practical decision, and I don't think practicality should make someone a villain. Update 1. My wife's parents didn't just call to argue. They showed up. They wanted paperwork. Not explanations, not reassurance, paperwork. Bank statements, trust records, transaction histories going back years. Not just for the trust either. They started asking questions about our general finances, how money moved through the household. Who had access to what? It stopped being about concern for my daughter and started feeling like an audit. At one point, they came over for dinner and brought a friend with them, a retired forensic accountant. This was presented casually, like it was normal to bring someone whose entire career was about finding financial misconduct into a family dispute. I refused to engage with that. I told them this was inappropriate and crossed a line. They insisted it was about transparency. That was when I decided to lock things down. I moved all the relevant documents into my home office, changed passwords on accounts I control, and installed a lock on the filing cabinet. I'm not hiding anything, but I'm also not handing over 10 years of financial history because my in-laws demanded it. I've learned over time that once you give them an inch, they take control of the narrative. My daughter, meanwhile, stopped even pretending to talk things through. She barely speaks unless it's clipped and loaded. I later found out she's been recording conversations on her phone. She claims it's for her own protection. I see it as teenage theatrics encouraged by adults who should know better. Either way, it's made every interaction feel hostile and performative. Extended family got involved faster than I expected. Cousins I haven't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions. Old stories started resurfacing. One cousin brought up an incident from over 15 years ago involving a small college fund I borrowed from temporarily and paid back late. That situation had nothing to do with this, but suddenly it was being framed as a pattern. It's amazing how people rewrite history when it suits them. The atmosphere in the house deteriorated quickly. My son reacted badly. He already felt exposed and ashamed, and now he was being painted as the villain who stole his sister's future. He blamed her for telling the grandparents and for setting all of this in motion. One argument between them got loud, and he slammed a door hard enough to crack the frame. People are now calling that violence. I see it as male frustration boiling over in a tense situation. No one was hurt. Nothing like that has ever happened before. My daughter used that incident to justify escalating again. More calls, more messages, more emotional appeals to people outside the household. We grounded her again because she continued to provoke situations and refuse boundaries. That meant extending restrictions, not loosening them. She lost remaining privileges she still had. I know how that sounds to outsiders, but structure doesn't stop being necessary just because someone is upset. The most frustrating part is how quickly the story stopped being about facts and turned into moral grandstanding. My in-laws started talking about legal options openly, not quietly, not as a last resort, but almost theatrically. They want to bring lawyers into this. They want formal action. They're convinced they've caught me doing something criminal, not just something they disagree with. I called their bluff. I told them they're free to pursue whatever route they think is appropriate. I'm not going to grovel or panic because they decided to escalate instead of de-escalate. If they want to drag this into a legal arena, then at least things will be based on reality instead of emotion and half-remembered stories from people with grudges. What's becoming clear to me is that this was never just about the trust fund. This is about control, about my in-laws asserting authority over decisions in my household, and my daughter choosing them as her allies instead of working through conflict where she lives. I'm being portrayed as some kind of tyrant, when in reality, I'm the only one trying to keep things from spiraling completely out of control. I still believe this could have been handled internally. I still believe the decision itself made sense given the circumstances. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly people would turn this into a referendum on my entire character and rewrite decades of history to support that narrative. Things are far from settled, and I have a feeling this is only the beginning. Update 2. I thought Update 1 was the peak of the chaos. The first thing that happened was my in-laws actually consulted a lawyer, not to sue immediately, but to understand the structure of the trust. That's the wording they used when they told me. I wasn't invited into those conversations, but I was informed of the conclusions like they were facts carved in stone. According to this lawyer, the trust required dual consent once my daughter turned 18 and was meant to be protected until then, except in specific situations. What I did, according to them, was exploit a gray area. Not an outright theft, not a clean violation, but something they're now treating like proof of intent. I don't agree with that framing. Gray area doesn't mean forbidden. It means flexible. But once that phrase started circulating, everything took on a different tone. Suddenly people weren't asking why I made the decision. They were asking how long I'd been planning it. Then I found out my daughter's school counselor filed a report, not about the money directly, but about her well-being. Apparently, my daughter has been unloading years' worth of grievances in those sessions. According to what filtered back to me, she's been describing a pattern of her medical care being overridden when she was younger, follow-up appointments being delayed, and therapy being stopped because I didn't think it was helping. That part is true. I did stop therapy at one point because it was turning into her leaning on it instead of learning resilience. Now it's being reframed as emotional neglect. That report opened a door I didn't ask to be opened. People I've never spoken to before are now looking at my parenting choices from a distance and drawing conclusions. It feels like being evaluated retroactively by strangers who only hear one side. At the same time, more details about my son's situation came out, not from me, but from people trying to use it as leverage. What's now being whispered is that his gambling debt wasn't just his own bets, that he was fronting money for other people, pooling bets, acting as a middleman in some cases. I knew some of that, not all of it, but enough to understand why the situation needed to be handled quickly and quietly. The money I paid didn't go to one account. It went to several. That's now being framed as me knowingly bailing out a whole group, which makes it sound far more sinister than it was in reality. My wife has not been handling this well. She's always left finances to me. That's how our marriage has worked. Now, under pressure, she's telling people she doesn't know the full picture, that she doesn't know where money comes from or goes. That's being spun as me controlling her financially. I see it as division of labor. Someone had to manage things, and she didn't want to. Now her uncertainty is being used as evidence. Because of that, I made some changes. I removed her from joint credit cards temporarily to prevent any impulsive decisions being made under emotional stress. I also canceled my daughter's private health insurance plan. She's still covered, just not under the additional plan that costs a significant amount monthly. Given the current situation, I didn't see the point in maintaining extras when they were being used as arguments against me. Socially, things have gotten uncomfortable in ways that are hard to explain unless you've lived it. Invitations stopped coming. People didn't confront me directly, they just went quiet. I found out secondhand that a couple we've known for years decided it was best to stay out of it. Another friend suddenly became very busy whenever my wife suggested getting coffee. It's subtle, but it's noticeable. You feel it when you walk into a room and conversations pause for half a second too long. Through all of this, the narrative has solidified in a way that feels coordinated, that I'm manipulative, that I'm controlling, that my daughter is being coached by her grandparents and professionals who have decided what story they want to tell. No one seems interested in the idea that she might be reacting emotionally and escalating because she's being encouraged to see herself as wronged. Every attempt I make to push back is treated as further proof of guilt. Every boundary I set is called retaliation. Every explanation is labeled justification. It feels like the situation has moved beyond the original issue and into something much broader and much harder to contain. I still don't believe this needed to turn into an investigation of my entire life and marriage. I still believe the decision itself was made under pressure and with the goal of preventing something worse. But at this point, it's clear that this isn't about resolving anything. It's about building a case, socially if not legally, and I'm being cast in a role I don't recognize myself in. I don't know where this goes next, but I know that people are no longer looking at individual actions. They're looking for a pattern, and once people decide there is one, everything you've ever done starts fitting into it, whether it belongs there or not. Update 3. After the last update, it became clear to me that letting this situation play out was a mistake. So I decided to stop reacting and start asserting control again. The first thing I did was consult my own attorney, not the same type my in-laws were using, but someone who specializes in civil disputes and reputational damage. After laying everything out, his view was that what the grandparents were doing could be framed as interference. They were contacting my daughter's school, speaking to professionals about me, and encouraging her to disengage from our household. Whether or not people agreed morally, there was a case to be made that they were inserting themselves into decisions that were not theirs to make. Based on that advice, I authorized filings against them for interference and against my daughter's school counselor for what I was told could qualify as indoctrination and overreach. The goal wasn't money. It was leverage and a formal record that I wasn't just sitting back accepting accusations as fact. At the same time, I tried to get ahead of the narrative within the family. I forwarded selected emails and messages to a group chat that included my siblings, cousins, and a few older relatives. These were messages that showed me asking reasonable questions, trying to de-escalate, and being met with hostility. I thought if people saw how things actually unfolded, they'd understand that I wasn't acting randomly or maliciously. That backfired almost immediately. Instead of quieting things down, it prompted people to start sharing entire email threads I didn't have. Messages from my wife that painted me as rigid. Messages from my daughter where she laid out grievances going back years. Even old emails between my wife and her parents discussing finances in ways I was never copied on. Once that door opened, it didn't close again. People weren't looking at context anymore. They were picking sides. Around this time, my son left town. This wasn't a dramatic disappearance, but it wasn't planned in any transparent way either. He told me he needed space and that things had become unbearable at home. Given everything happening, I didn't disagree. I gave him some money so he could get a place and reset somewhere else, with the understanding that he'd stay in contact and start handling things himself. Within a week, his responses slowed. Within 2, he stopped answering altogether. That made everything worse. The same people who said I enabled him now said I helped him run. The same relatives who blamed him before started talking about how abandoned he must feel. I couldn't win on that front. Then I found out my wife had been meeting with her parents behind my back. I didn't find out through her. I found out because a shared calendar invitation was accidentally forwarded to my email. A meeting at her parents' house, marked private, scheduled during work hours. When I confronted her, she said she needed support and that things had gone too far for her to handle alone. She didn't deny discussing finances or future plans. She just said she felt shut out for years and that this situation forced her to finally speak up. That was when it became obvious that this wasn't just about the trust anymore. This was about people deciding they no longer needed me involved. The stress bled into my job. I work in a field where discretion matters, and once legal action started showing up on public records, it didn't take long for it to reach my employer. I was called into a meeting and told that, given the circumstances, it would be best if I stepped back temporarily while things were sorted out. They framed it as neutral, but the implication was clear. I was becoming a liability. Instead of pulling back, I doubled down publicly. I made a long post on Facebook laying out my perspective. I didn't name names, but I talked about mob morality, about how parenting decisions were being second-guessed by people who only heard one side, and about how control was being confused with responsibility. I expected some pushback, but I also expected support. What I got was silence, followed by quiet unfriending. No comments, no messages, just people disappearing from my feed. Shortly after that, my daughter formally cut contact. She blocked my number, my email, and my social media. Any communication now goes through her grandparents. She also stopped using our home address for anything official. Mail from her school and medical providers now goes straight to them. I'm being told this is temporary, that she's overwhelmed, that things will calm down once legal matters settle. I don't see it that way. From where I'm standing, this looks deliberate, structured, like she's been preparing for this longer than anyone wants to admit. I tried to take control back because things were spiraling. Instead, every move I made was treated as proof of exactly what people already decided I was. At this point, it feels like the story is being written without me, and all I can do is keep records and wait for whatever comes next. Final update. The court ruled last month. Not dramatically, not with some big speech, just paperwork and numbers. I was ordered to repay a portion of the money taken from the trust. Not all of it, which people seem to gloss over, but enough to sting. More importantly, the trust itself was moved out of anyone in the family's control. A third-party administrator was appointed, and every future decision now requires oversight. No discretion, no flexibility, no room to act quickly if something actually happens. It's frozen in a way that feels punitive more than protective. That part bothered me more than the repayment. The ruling made it clear that while I didn't act with criminal intent, I also didn't have the authority I convinced myself I did. The gray area I leaned on was acknowledged, then closed. I wasn't praised for stepping in. I wasn't condemned as a villain either. I was treated like someone who couldn't be trusted to make judgment calls anymore. Around the same time, I learned that my daughter had been planning her exit long before any of this blew up. That was the part no one mentioned in court, but became obvious afterward. She had documents sent to her grandparents' house for over a year. She'd already shifted medical records, school correspondence, and personal mail. The trust fund discovery wasn't some impulsive act. She waited until she had leverage and support lined up. The timing wasn't accidental. In hindsight, a lot of things make more sense now. Her detachment. The way she didn't argue much once things escalated. She wasn't trying to convince me. She was preparing to leave. My son resurfaced briefly after the ruling, not to reconcile or explain anything. He wanted money, not a large amount, just enough to get through something. When I said no, he stopped responding again. That was the entirety of that interaction. I haven't heard from him since. My wife finalized the divorce shortly after. The filing included details I didn't expect to see laid out so plainly. Years of financial decisions described as coercive, accounts she didn't have access to. choices framed as unilateral. Reading it felt surreal because those were just logistics to me. Systems, structure. On paper, they looked cold. I moved out not long after. Downsized more than I planned to. The house felt too large anyway once it became clear no one else was coming back. Friends didn't reach out. Co-workers stayed polite but distant. The temporary step back at work quietly became permanent. No one said it was related, but the timing didn't leave much room for interpretation. From where I'm standing, this wasn't about money in the way people keep insisting. The money was a tool, a symbol. What actually ended things was that I stopped being necessary. Once decisions moved out of my hands, once people found ways to operate without me, the rest followed naturally. I didn't lose my family because of the trust fund. I lost them because they stopped needing me.